That's
I don't know.
good.
I don't know what you want to talk about. I have no idea what this podcast is. Oh my God, you're recording now. Now I'm gonna get a little nervous.
Yeah, so there's no specific goal to talk about in this podcast. It's a conversation between you and me, and we're gonna talk about you. We're gonna talk maybe a little bit less about me because I'm more interested in you, but you can ask questions about me. And specifically right now, what I wanted to talk about is what you just were saying, that love is always gonna be there. So tell me a little bit more about that.
Sure. Do you want me to talk about the how I came to that realization,
Not
or?
necessarily, not necessarily, but you can tell me what that realization was.
Sure. I mean, I think that do you want me to introduce myself, or are you just gonna like we're just gonna jump into the conversation?
You know, sounds like you want to introduce yourself. I was
No,
gonna do it, but you can do it.
I don't know what the format is. You just
There's no rules. There's no rules, Kibby. This is Kibby. She's a PhD in psychology that we met at Duke a few years ago, and she's following me here in New York. Now you're a New York Presbyterian, is that right?
yeah, I'm doing my internship at Cornell Presbyterian. Yeah.
Yeah. And where are you working in your internship? So internship's clinical work, is that right?
Yeah, it's mostly the clinical year. It's 1 year of doing like as much clinical work as possible. And I came here mostly for work with personality disorders, and to learn like transference focused psychotherapy, to learn about like the self and identity and connection and things like that. Things I liked at Duke as well, but they have a different approach here. They're more psychodynamic and just a different way of thinking about it.
I see a lot of faces that you're making when you say psychodynamic. What is that about?
Oh, look at you. Look at you, babe. No, I think I just like that. I know it's just different than, my very CBT background, our CBT background, right?
Yeah.
But I really like it because it does give a little bit more emphasis on like how someone grows up and how someone learns over time, like what is love and what is family and what is who am I. So I think I like all those questions and tackling that in therapy, and so I like that approach. So.
I like it too. I actually did psychodynamic training for 3 years, since my second year residency until the end of my fourth year residency.
Huh.
And
At
it was
Duke,
I
they
did,
have that?
yeah, they
Huh.
do. They have an elective for us, and I loved it. I was seeing patients twice a week, and it's kind of a different animal. It is a different animal when you see them twice a week compared to once a week. And at the same time, I had to do my own psychodynamic psychotherapy that was also twice a week. So
Cool.
it becomes this weird thing where everything surrounds, like you're really attentive into the way that you're perceiving reality, and you're like, why am I perceiving it this way? And then you're trying to find your blind spots, and then you're trying to find your patient's blind spot, and it becomes this like really acute way of seeing your psyche that is almost incredibly exhausting but super interesting at the same time. I really liked it. I really did like it. And I also like CBT. I think that they're both really useful, and integrating them both is like I would think even more useful. I think that they can be synergistic.
Yeah, I think I tended to do that anyway, even when I went into CBT. I think I love that part of it, that kind of like really like finding your blind spots. And I like the intensity of relationship. So like the 2 times a week kind of like, really facilitates that. But yeah, I think that sometimes pulling out and having like a model with CBT is helpful, but sometimes just like opening it up and just seeing what emerges is
Yeah.
also awesome. So yeah, I didn't realize you could do that at Duke. That's amazing.
Yeah, I really like. So not a lot of people do it. It's an elective that it's there,
Mm.
and I took it. Another person in residency took it while I was taking it, and I think nobody took it after I left. I don't know if anybody's taking it now.
I'm
So,
not surprised that you are the one who took it.
well, it's my jam. Like I thought for a while that I wanted to become a psychoanalyst. I
Hmm.
really thought that I was gonna go that way, and then I got kind of interested. Have you heard of this guy? Oh, I just forgot his name. He wrote a book called The Way of the Psychonaut. Stanislav Grof. Have you heard of him?
Mm-mm.
Okay, so this dude's as a psychoanalyst, and he transitioned from psychoanalysis into psychedelic assisted psychotherapy research. And he's like 90 years old right now. He's still alive, he's around. He just made a book called The Way of the Psychonaut. He wrote a book, and then he also made a movie, I think, with the same name. I haven't seen the movie, but I did read the book, and I like it because at the beginning he talks about the major psychoanalytic theories depending on the person who wrote them, and it's a good, nice summary. And then he has his own theory of how we perceive reality and why we perceive it that way, and it's very tied to psychedelics, and it's very not necessarily traditional science. Okay, so if you read it, you're gonna be like, what? Yeah, but his premise is really cool, and and I love that premise because he talks about the way that we do science right now. We create a bunch of clinical trials, and then in these trials we try to make sure that all these conditions are controlled, and then there's this one variable that we can change, so that we make sure that if by that changing of the variable a different outcome will occur. We try to eliminate the possibility of chance being involved in this thing from happening. But this guy takes a step back and says, well, everything that you're doing comes really from a paradigm of the way that you perceive how the world works. And you're really testing that paradigm to in different aspects. And that's great because paradigms are a good way to live. And then what will happen, and it will happen every single time, is that at some point you're starting to test the paradigm so much and so wildly that you will encounter yourself with the edges of what that paradigm can't really explain. And then suddenly you'll find like weird things, and then he starts talking about things related to psychedelics, started paranormal stuff, like a bunch of stuff. And then he says, and at some point that in itself would start to get replicated and replicated and replicated to the point where the paradigm that you're coming from doesn't really explain these outlier events that normally you can consider like pseudoscience or just
Mm-hmm.
like spurious results. And this is replicating itself so much that now you really have to take a step back and change the paradigm. And when you change the paradigm, that includes your prior paradigm and these new things. And then you start testing things differently. And that's this whole premise of the book. It's really interesting. I think you would
That's
be.
basically like a theory of learning, right? You basically you have a hypothesis, a theory of how things work, you test it out, you like add to it, and eventually like your schema is not going to fit like this new information that's like been hanging out there. And so you have to accommodate, right? You have to like open your schema so that it includes that and the old stuff. Um, yeah.
Exactly. That's what he
Yeah.
says. And then he
That's
says,
cool.
well, this is a lot of what I'm going to say is kind of like based on my experience treating patients and through like the decades that he did psychedelic assisted psychotherapy. And then he came up with this theory. And this theory is, it's kind of psychoanalytic to a point. Then he goes even deeper and talks about these prenatal stages, and and based on the prenatal stage that you were kind of like stuck on, you will really interpret your reality. It's kind of out there, but it's kind of interesting. And I don't know, I kind of like the guy. I forget why I brought it up,
Send,
but
send me that book. Yeah.
yeah, I'll
We can talk
send it
about
to you.
psychodynamic, psychoanalytic,
Oh
and
yeah, yeah, yeah.
psychedelics, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I hope that I'm able to do more research there. I
Yeah, that'd be
can't.
great.
Yeah, I'm dabbling on it, but but a few things need to happen before I can fully dedicate myself to it.
Mm,
So crossing fingers.
yeah,
But anyway, too much about me. So you're in New York now.
yeah, I
Yeah,
am. Yeah, I could talk. You know, if you want me, I could. I could talk about the my trip.
yeah, sure.
I mean, I think that this is going to be actually processing it for the first time out loud, so it's not
Okay.
going to make any sense. So I'll
Uh-huh.
try to piece it together and try to understand how it's going to fit into my general schema.
Yeah.
Maybe I don't. Maybe I have to accommodate and make a new one. Um, I think it's made me see things that I've like have known but didn't like see. You know what I mean? Like I think that especially now, like I've my most of my research was in empathy and thinking about like personality disorders. And when I like about personality disorders is just like people who can feel like they're connected to others. They don't feel like loved by others in a way. Um, and that's just like all through grad school, kind of just trying to think about what that means and why does someone feel disconnected? What does it mean to be connected? Um, and just watching with patients, like that's what they want ultimately, right? I think that that's my bias where like every one of my patients just like wants to be loved and wants to love. And if anything gets in the way of that, their anxiety or their anger or whatever, the self-doubt, that's what they come in for therapy for. And
Hmm.
and maybe because people know that I like that, people they were sending patients who tend to be in that. But like I was like, oh, like everyone, it's really about just like wanting to connect to others. That's it.
Hmm.
So I don't know. I was just thinking about attachment theory and like what does it mean to feel love? What does it mean to feel like loved? What is that sensation? How do we know? Those are all like my academic thoughts.
So how do you know how it feels to be loved?
That that right there, I was like, that is a whole research area, right? I mean, think about it. It's like, all these people want to feel love. They're like, oh, I don't want to be rejected. I want a boyfriend. I want to have a friend. I want to feel connected. It's like, what does that even mean? Right? It's like people have this like internal like this gut sense of that, but they even when you in CBT or something like that, we're trying to have like actual behaviorally objective goals. They're like, I want a friend who I can talk to, but like, is that it? So it's an open question that I'm trying to explore.
It's funny because what I was thinking is that there are things that and when we talk about knowing, we talk about logic and the mind and like discernment and teasing out different little aspects of a big whole. But when you're talking about love, can you know love? Like I don't know that you can.
Can you? I mean, I think that's what what jobs of scientists try to do, right? They try to take the unknowable and make them knowable.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I'm not saying that your research is gonna fail ultimately.
It
I'm,
might.
I'm just saying that in my mind, when I think about love, is something that I feel, and
Mm.
something that I do, but it's not something that I wait to think about. Like it's not something that because I feel like the moment I think about love, I kind of like suppress it a little bit.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like I'm acting from the love state, and that requires a degree of not thinking and being really just in the moment and just like saying the
Mm.
thing that comes in the moment, and the moment that I'm thinking, oh, what is that, goes away.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you think of it as like a flow state, as almost
Yes.
like oneness with the moment, like a mind, almost like mindfulness state, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think
That's
that was, yeah. Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Yeah.
I guess that you could that's a way to think about it, right?
Right, right. And then you just like defined it, right? As a moment, it's a state of being where there's no like pre-planning or conscious thought. It's just like spontaneity and spontaneous behavior.
I guess that you can talk and think about love. Okay, got it.
Can I don't know, can we?
I,
So anyway, so all these questions are in my head. Like I still am thinking about it. I think that when last weekend I was with a bunch of friends and it was just like a lovely atmosphere and very calm and which is very rare around this time, right? To feel like be surrounded by people and just relax and be in the presence of people.
yeah.
And I really felt that over the pandemic, like how much you're missing. Like even like we're talking through Zoom and we're getting some stuff, but it would feel very different if we were in person, right?
Right.
So I felt that so strongly during the pandemic. It felt so like icky to not have that like love exchange kind of thing. But I was with friends and I had some mushrooms and we all kind of did. And then I just felt like I could just that kind of the kind of a aha moment. Like it's just, the thing that I felt, the thing that you feel like intrinsically in those moments, I like could see it. I was like, wow, look at that. I was just marveling at it in my own head. Like I was like on the couch closing my eyes, but I could feel that very strongly. And then I just had this realization that this is like the life energy, right? This is like always there. It connects people. It connects, it's something that we return to all the time and we're seeking out, and maybe we go away from it for a while to kind of almost feel like the distance, to feel the disconnect, and then we search for it and come back, and that might take time. It's not like, you might be connected to it more than others, more in different times in your life more than others. And I think another thing that I realized was that you can an expression of love that I really was like resonating with was like looking back on all the people in my life and just marveling at their specialness, is marveling at like, oh my God, my friend XYZ, like they're so beautiful in their own way. They're so special. Like in my head, watching them give me love and me give them love and express that. And then with another friend, I just realized that like, this experience of love that I was reflecting on was just like this acknowledging and basking in that person's specialness. And just, yeah. So I
I
think,
love that.
yeah. So
Yeah.
now I'm like saying, I haven't said this out loud. So I'm like, is that right? Does that capture what I experienced? I think so. I think that I'm working with some people with narcissistic personality disorder, and there's a lot of stigma around like, oh, they want to feel special and better than everyone else. Like, yeah, they want this stuff and want to be cooler than it. So, and then when they discover that, they're so ashamed, right? There's a lot of like stigma around narcissism. But when you think about it, it's like if you really love someone, like, or in love, or like the way a mother looks at their babies, it has this quality of like, oh my gosh, this is the only person in the world at this moment, and they're so special. And there's no one, like there's this unique kind of love that people talk about.
Hmm.
And then these people who didn't have that crave it. And so it's just like, why didn't we just think of narcissism or narcissistic personality disorder as like someone who just like really wants to be loved? Like
Yeah.
that's a very human thing that we just take for granted for. And you could just, you know, you might be able to explain it like, I want to feel special, but
Yeah.
you
And then you
know,
could define it as like, I don't know, I'm gonna say like deficit of love disorder, and it would be like way less stigmatizing, right? And then in itself, like just by the name of it, you know how to treat it. And I know what you mean. And I love the other thing that you said about like basking in the specialness of each person. That made me think about something I do, which with my close friends, I sometimes like point out a little bit of like, hey, you could do a little like you can come running with me. We can do a little bit. We could drink a little bit less. We could like do all these things. But they have their own special personality as well that I could just appreciate instead of trying to like want to change these little things, you know.
right.
And
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
I think
and
it's also, I think it feels like this feeling, it's funny because in research, just operationalize empathy as just like the ability to read other people's emotions, to be like, you're feeling sad. But
mhm,
the way my lived experience, like with patients or something, or with anyone I care about or a person, is like this holding space where you're sharing in that person's emotion. That is part of the definition of empathy, but like, it's just kind of like, doing like holding this reality together and just really just being with that person in their experience, right? And that's part of it. It's kind of like creating space to share love, to be like, oh my gosh, you're feeling this, or you're doing this. And yeah, I don't know, I got on a tangent, but
well, there is no tangents, Kibby, because we're not talking about anything in particular. So we're gonna be talking about whatever it is that we talk about, which in my mind, it makes me like, why did you choose psychology? What made you like do that? Among all the
yeah,
things that you could have done in your life, like why did you choose to become a psychologist?
I, I I've written about this so many times, and for some reason I'm coming up with a blank to like, what is the real reason? I mean, I think the simple answer is that my mother and a lot of different family members I had struggle with alcoholism, and emotion dysregulation and depression and all these different things. And I just powerfully saw what it was like for someone to not feel like they have a sense of belonging, they didn't feel loved, and how that pain can ripple out to everyone around them, like me or anyone my mom was close to. And I mean, I think that it just made me think about. I think the one thing that growing up in that environment made me do is you have to think for myself, like as my own individual, but also think for her. Like, oh, she's yelling at me, she's blaming me for something. I feel horrible, and also she must be scared. She must be hurt. This is how she, to try to understand and like empathize with her as well as myself. And so
Mm-hmm.
I just always had that way of thinking about things and understanding that everything is a lens, like all of our psyches are kind of a lens that we see the world through, and then we could look at the exact same thing very differently.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that got me to psychology research, and then eventually what got me into clinical work was going to Thailand, or training as a yoga teacher first, and then going to Thailand to learn Thai massage, and just being like totally immersed in the practice of learning how to like create space for someone. I mean, I didn't actually learn that much Thai massage. Like, I don't actually know, like, if someone was like, give me what is the technique? I'd be like, I don't know. But it's like the way, like, my teacher there, Master Pichet, who was this, like, 50, at this point he must be 60. He has like a little bowl cut, so he just cuts his own hair. He has like T-shirts of Mickey Mouse that his students and
Right.
he smokes in his shrine, and he just teaches classes in like this garage basically. But his whole thing is like he taught us like to listen to body. That's his whole thing. He didn't speak that much English, so he has these kind of like
That you
funny
literally
phrases.
said, listen to body.
Listen to body. That's like, if we were to ask a question like, how much pressure do I put, like, where do I put my hand? He'd be like, listen to body. And so we're like, what? Like, what does that mean? Why didn't you teach us the thing? We paid, flew over here. So that, but what he was saying is like, just like learning to listen, like learning to just be there for somebody and create space and like really listen to them on many different levels. So I think that experience led me to like, oh, I want to listen to people and help them that way. How will I do that in the way that leverages my skills? And I think that psychotherapy was like, I was like, oh, I could do that.
So, or maybe it was a scam and listen to body was the best way to get away with it.
It was definitely a scam. Yeah, just a man in his garage.
But I believe it. I do think that there is a connection between our body and our minds. I do feel if I'm having loving feelings, I feel something in my chest. If I'm having like sometimes when I'm having guilt or if something that I feel like a sort of loss, I sometimes feel it in my belly. Sometimes I feel weird feelings in my throat. Maybe I should go to the doctor. I don't know. But sometimes it's related. Sometimes I feel that when I'm not saying the things that I want to say.
Mm.
So I don't know. I think there's something there for sure that maybe we just haven't explored that much.
Well, I mean, don't you feel sometimes like that with when you see patients, when you see a patient that has like a big emotion or something like that, we call it countertransference, but like, don't you feel something, you might even not know right away, but there's a, like, if you really listen to body, you could listen. I feel that way with a lot of trauma patients who don't recognize what they're feeling, and they're very shut off, and
Mhm.
they're like, oh no, I'm fine. And then I feel like, oh, I don't feel good, or I feel sad. I don't know why, because they don't seem sad, and it's just this kind of like listen to body.
Yeah, 100%. And then you're feeling it for them, and then you kind of like try to bring it up to them. Hey, like maybe there's like this thing going on, or maybe there's that thing going on.
Yeah.
Okay, we get it. You're a psychologist. So, Kibby, so tell me about your podcast.
Yeah, I mean, the podcast. Oh, that was so. The podcast is so fun. I didn't think I'd ever do something like that because I really don't. I really feel weird about self promotion. Like I feel
I
weird
see.
about like getting out there. I think that's one of the barriers I have, but that's part of this field that if I want to explore messages and get ideas out, and that was I knew that was some way I want to communicate my ideas and thoughts.
Hmm.
Um, the podcast is mostly, kind of in line with all that I care about. It's like helping people connect to others through psychotherapy, and when especially if people are struggling with mental health issues. So my friend Jacqueline Trumbull and I, we're in the same lab. We're in Zach's lab, and I was doing my dissertation on how mindful breathing impacts empathy.
Mm.
And the program that funded it also, I proposed doing like a outreach portion of that, and with the same mission. And so, that we created Little Help for Our Friends, which is a podcast we wanted to make for people who have loved ones struggling with mental health issues. So friends, family members, children, like coworkers or anyone who is really impacted by someone they're close to having a mental health issue. And we really just think that's a really important because it's, we're so connected in ways that we don't understand, and mental health is spoken about very individually, like you have depression and how do we help you who has depression, but it really affects like a whole system of people, right?
Hmm.
And I feel like people who tend to have like a loved one with mental health issues, they don't recognize that it influences them, right? They're like so focused on helping that person or being angry with that person, they don't think, "Oh, I'm affected by it too." So we wanted to have a podcast that, just talks about different topics. Like we cover like an issue or a diagnosis or something,
Oh,
and
cool.
speak about it like, how are we going to talk to people who have a loved one with this issue, and what, like, kind of explaining what the illness is or the issue is, tips to how to take care of themselves and how to deal with that person and manage the situation. So yeah, but it's been fun so far. We this our first couple episodes, and so far so
Nice.
good. People like it, and yeah, so it's fun.
That's fun. And so this is not interview based. It's more like you guys talking about a specific topic.
Yeah, we will talk about a specific topic. I like to approach it as like we're learning about it together because especially we're
Mm.
trainees. So it's a really nice opportunity for us to like kind of dive into that topic, kind of learn from it, learn about the research, kind of tell people what we've learned. And also we have sometimes we'll have like interviews. We'll have interviews with people who have struggled with that thing, or we interviewed our advisor, Zach, about
Oh, I love Zach. Shout out to
yeah,
Zach.
yeah. Shout out to Zach. He was great. He was our first interview, and we all have expert interviews like that of someone who is like has some professional expertise in like treating that thing or whatever. And Zach does. We had him on a BPD episode, borderline personality disorder episode. Yeah,
Amazing.
yeah. So we're kind of seeing how it goes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was thinking as you were talking in your about your podcast and like the different people and how their loved ones have experienced trauma and their experience of that. And I think I could be wrong. I don't actually know the data of this, but I do believe that if you're in a sort of healing profession, you must have had something like that happen to you to some extent, right? Like either to yourself or to a close person enough that you will you would feel motivated enough that to make your life healing others, right? It's a way to know yourself and really know others to and help them feel a little bit better about themselves.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I think.
Yeah. Yeah. Remember, Noga, right?
Yeah, of course I know
Yeah,
Noga. Yeah.
yeah. So she had this whole concept that she kept teaching us. It's called a wounded healer, and talking about like, yeah, the people who treat certain kind of traumas or conditions have, maybe suffer from that in their own lives, and in some ways, there could be a stigma around that, right? Of like, oh, we should be super healthy, we should, whatever. Um, or does that get in the way of our ability to help others because we're not biased? But I think seeing it being open about it and seeing that it could be a great strength because you really understand the situation from like multiple different aspects, right? You know, firsthand experience, you know, clinically, professional, academically. So I think that's a great way to like really know something.
100%. 100%. Yeah, I think that in my specific case, like my mom has a trauma history. Like she had a very traumatic episode before I was born, and I feel like that translated a lot into my life, and in the way that she was always kind of scared. And I do come from Ecuador. Okay, you could get robbed in the street any day,
Right, right.
and so like there is a baseline level of paranoia in that country that is considered normal.
Mm-hmm.
But this was a little bit more, and I didn't quite understand it when I was a little kid, and I grew a little bit frustrated when I was older. But then after a few years, I realized, oh, this is probably not normal. This is probably something happened to her, and I don't know that consciously I made the decision to go to psychiatry specifically for her. But I definitely had this drive of trying to understand my mind and the mind of others. And I'm
Mm.
sure it had to do something about it. I mean, I also wanted to be a musician. I just don't know that I sing that well. You know, like I think that like if you have a few drinks and you listen to me sing, you're gonna like it for sure. But if you're completely sober and attentive to what I'm doing, maybe not. Maybe not.
You got to be in the right mindset,
Yeah,
is what you're saying,
absolutely. Yeah, exactly.
to really
Exactly.
appreciate it. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, do you see how that affected you in terms of like how you react to things or think about the world and
Yeah.
yourself?
So when I was younger, I remember like a little kid, a little kid. I must have been like 8 years old or something. And I was walking. I lived in a gated community, and I wanted to walk out because I think I wanted to rent a video game, and I needed to cross the street. So I needed to leave the gated community. I needed to cross the street and rent a video game. And my parent, like nobody, I was 8, so people didn't want me doing that stuff. And I don't know, like I guess that if you go to Denmark, there's like 4-year olds walking down the street alone, but it isn't. But here in New York, you have like 10 4-year olds on a leash with a teacher. I've never seen such a thing. Like I get it. I mean, this is I guess the safe way to do it here, but I was so shocked that it was like little dogs, you know, like being
Uh-huh.
like walked. It's kind of freaky. It was kind of freaky. Anyway, I was walking out from this gated community, and there was this dude entering the community. Like there was a guy that lived there that just entered, which is unusual because people enter in their cars, but he was entering walking. And then I looked at him, and he looked at me, and I realized that I was afraid that he was a kidnapper or something, and he just like noticed that I was scared of him, and he found that hilarious. So he like pretended to be a kidnapper and try to scare me, and I freaked the fuck out. I started running, and and then it was fine. He just laughed and he was like, "No, dude, I'm your neighbor. What are you doing?" And then I rented my video game back, came back home. But at some point, I realized that I was scared of the world for no reason,
Mm.
and and then I realized, oh, it's not that it's no reason. I'm scared of the world because my mom is scared of the world, and she has taught me to be scared of the world through her behavior. And since then, I think I made a point to really fight that feeling. And let's not fight it, but more like embrace the biased like the biased model of the world that I had in my psyche. And so in some ways, like I pushed myself to the to outside my comfort zone, and I would talk to strangers more. I would move into like countries that I knew nobody in, and over time, over the period of years, I became like just less afraid. Like I don't like of course I'm gonna be a little bit afraid like every once in a while. Like it's in there, you know, but and I'm sometimes I may be a little bit distrustful, but I'm very aware of that being like pre it's like this thing that I don't necessarily should consider what's true.
Hmm. I mean, I
Yeah.
was about to say that, when you talked about how, your mom taught you to be fearful, I was like, I don't see that in you. But I was like, does he like really, you know, is he really
Right.
good at acting not fearful and actually he's like super anxious inside? I mean, it was
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah. So I guess that I noticed this very early on in my life. So it's like I don't it's not my main drive. Like it's not my main way to perceive the world anymore. Like it's not, but it was when I was young for sure.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. And
That's
and
interesting.
that's the beauty of like psychotherapy and self-improvement and looking at yourself and being introspective and meditating a lot. And I mean this is one of the reasons, like meditating and several other activities. When I was in Ecuador, I've talked about this in other episodes, but like psychedelic use by shamans is it's legal. It's something like alternative medicine, so you can go to your shaman, go do ayahuasca, and like overcome like a specific issue that you're struggling with. And I did some of that, and it was very helpful.
Mm-hmm.
So and then yeah, like I think that I make sure, and I still do, to try to find what it is that it's preventing me from being attuned to reality, and
Mm-hmm.
then and let's try to fix that a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
uh,
Yeah, I think that for example, hallucinogens or even just like intense insight moments at least gives me the freedom of realizing that the way I saw the world wasn't the only reality. And that's the thing. I don't believe that there's a one reality. I had moments of stepping back and be like, whoa, that's what my brain is doing.
mm,
Whoa, like why? I'm not thinking that way now. So it gives that kind of feeling of subjectivity where it's like it's just so freeing because anything that you are suffering from or anything that you experience, you're like, this is just one of probably infinite amount of ways to experience it. And it could be kind of overwhelming and scary because some people really identify with that. Like I think I identify with a lot of parts of I identify with a lot of like my intellect, like almost kind of obsessive compulsive like intellectual side of me, but then and then when you let go of it and see outside of it, you're like, oh no, what if it's nothing, right? You question everything. Yeah. So,
uh, something that I b- truly believe is true is that you see the world through your emotional state that you're going through. I don't even want to say emotional state. I want to say like your mind state. So if you're on a very obsessive mindset, yeah, everything, like the world's about to fall apart and you need to like make sure that you're in control of every single variable so that it doesn't. And then if you're in a very like chill mindset, everything's fine. Nobody's gonna care if you die today. And then if you're in a very like stimulated, confident mindset, you really can achieve whatever you want in your life, and nothing looks like a barrier really. It looks like an opportunity in disguise. If you're in a depressed mind state, you can there's nothing you can do in this world today. If you're looking like if you're in love, you're like loving everybody around you. And what's funny is that depending on your mind state and the way that you see the world, you act in the specific, your behavior makes sure to tell you that what you're doing, it's exactly right. So it doesn't matter, right? Like it does, if you're in an obsessive state and you need to control everything, you will find a way to give yourself positive feedback that you're right. So it's kind of like a trick. It's a trick that we're all
yeah.
that we could potentially be trapped in, unless you have that mindfulness capacity to take that step back and say, no, 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 no. I mean, this like thing, and then you crack a joke inside your mind, and you're laughing, and whoop, the whole world changes. And
Right.
that's cool. That's a
Yeah,
cool.
I think it's cool. Like we say this in like DBT that like emotions love themselves. So like basically they motivate you to kind of act in ways that confirm it, right? Or make the situation just in line with that emotion. And it's kind of like how we tend to repeat patterns in our life. We kind of do things over and over again to kind of confirm like, oh, I'm a horrible person, no one likes me. Well, we're gonna end up going into situations where no one's gonna like you, right? And like acting in ways and then perpetuating that like sad, rejected emotion. So yeah, it's weird how we do that, and then to be able to step back out of it and say, whoa, to just see that that's happening and to have some agency over it.
Right.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. So what else is going on with your life, Kibby?
Oh, I mean, that's a main thing. That's a main, I mean, I just, I'm just thinking about that a lot, you know, trying to trace it into other parts of my life. No, I just think it's interesting because I think that you know, I was just talking to my friend recently, and I'm talking to a lot of friends about like when they're becoming mothers, right? We're kind of at the age where everyone's becoming mothers. So, and one of my friends recently said that like time is not linear. She sees as soon as she had her baby, she sees that time is actually like a spiral, right? She was like reading a lot about that and how we constantly will like repeat these patterns and go over, you know, like through generations and in your own daily life and stuff like that. And progress is really just like moving that spiral in a slightly different direction, but we're still making those circles. So I don't know. That's what's going on in my life. Just pondering that and love and all that stuff.
Wow. So you're saying that there's no way we can go up
Yes,
literally.
that's exactly what I'm saying. That we're stuck. We're stuck in the same crap that we do every day, and all our parents did, and for all of time. So you're
My
welcome.
God, that's so sad. That's so sad. I don't
Well,
know.
I mean, at least we're aware of it, you know.
Well, but I don't believe in that. I agree that that's one choice that you can make in your life. I do agree with that, but I do think that, and also, what when we're talking about progress, let's just make sure that we're talking about the same thing. What do you mean by progress? And this spiral, upward spiral of progress. Are you talking
Sure.
societal progress and in what way? What's progress?
Gosh, you're really getting to the edges of the things that I know and the things that I don't know. I mean, I think that instead of just if you're just thinking about it like parents and thinking like generations, where let's say your mom or our moms, you know, are struggling with their traumas from something that they pass something down to us, we might repeat some of that stuff, right, in our own behavior, and then we might notice it, and it's not like it goes away. It's not like, oh, goodbye fear or goodbye, you know, whatever, but we just like maybe like change it a little bit, and then our kids will do like have elements of that and kind of repeat that, and they'll change it in their own way, right? So it's just, I think it's not just like like straight line. It's just like we will just repeat things and maybe we'll change it a little bit more each time.
Got it. Okay, so I think that I agree with you, and I think that we're just talking about the way that I see it that is a little bit different is that it's a matter of speed, in the sense that I agree it's impossible not to inherit traits and behavioral patterns and
Hmm.
traumas from your family. It's impossible not to. That's just something that will happen to every single person on planet Earth. Now, I really like what this guy says, David Data. He's kind of like a tantra yoga teacher, and but most yoga traditions talk about this, at least the more spiritually inclined ones. And it's kind of like the first phase of your life is to really overcome the traumas that were given to you by your parents, and then maybe like by society, and then you start living your purpose, and then you like fulfill your purpose, and then after you live your fulfill your purpose, you're just like living in the moment, and
What?
yeah, and then you just
Okay.
like yeah.
One, two, three.
Right. So I feel like that's a way to live too, and that's a little bit more intense, a little bit like unusual, I guess even. But I also think that's a possible way to do it.
I don't think that's how I live my life. I think no. I mean, I think that I had to live like my purpose first and then revisit like, oh, these are all the things that I inherited from my mom, or like it like you live I lived my life and then I came back and I was like, oh, I'm my parents are coming out of me now, especially like at this age, and then I have
Maybe,
to
but
rethink
but
about it.
it, okay, I see what you're saying, but let me ask you something. How do you know what your purpose is if you're in the midst of being a slave to the patterns that you were born to?
Oh, but that then you're basically saying you only can live your purpose by not by living outside of these patterns. Is that even
No,
possible?
no, that's not what I'm saying. I'm just, first of all, I'm not saying anything. We're just brainstorming here. Second, I think that a way to see it is that part of the purpose is to like discover yourself beyond those patterns, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
there are things that are going to be part of you forever, and then there are some things that, okay, so what are these okay, let's go more psychodynamic into this, right? Like you're born into your house and you're born into a society that will praise certain aspects of you and will not like other aspects of your whole personality. That's just
Mm-hmm.
how it works. Now you're a little kid, you're 2 or 3 or whatever, and then when you do that thing that is not accepted, and then they tell you, no, 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 Kibby, don't do it, then you like in that moment you don't understand that your parents are just casually saying you no. You're like you think you're gonna die, okay? Like you will be thrown to the street and you will have to figure life out on your own. So what do? You're like, no, 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 I'm gonna die if I keep behaving in this particular pattern. So let's just like put it's very deeply into my unconscious, just like never do it again. And then suddenly you become this uh, clash of behaviors and ways of thinking that are what your parents and what your society and what your friends thought was nice and cool and great. And then there's these other aspects of you that you're repressing that are also part of you and are great parts of you. But you need to discover that too in order to discover yourself and in order to know who you are. That's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying.
Yes, sure, sure. But okay, I mean, I could give an example of how that played out in my life. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know if we're gonna illuminate anything, but but as you were talking, I was thinking about me, of course. um, but okay, so I think one pattern that I've seen in my family is that there's almost these two figures. There's this loving, I care about connection and family and whatever, and then there's the hard worker, the obsessive hard worker, almost narcissist. You just call them narcissistic because they're just so withdrawn into their own world and their thoughts, and they're to the detriment of their family. Like they rather work than hang out with their family. So my grandmother was like that.
Mm-hmm.
She's like, oh, she's like so focused on her work and she's a little bit obsessive. And that really hurt my mother, who has I just want to connect, I want to talk, and she felt super rejected by this mother figure, right? Her mother. And then she ended up marrying someone, my dad, who was also very obsessive and a workaholic, right? And then gave birth to me, who, I guess I was like a dominant person. Like if you ask anyone, Kibby's like obsessed with working and stuff like that.
Mm.
So I had these like, so I was taught from my mom, who she was so depressed, and so she divorced my dad, and so depressed and angry at me, like took it out on me, of like
Mm.
whenever I would like focus on schoolwork and not focus on her, she'd get very upset, and she would
Oh no.
say, you're just like your dad. And so like that kind of pattern play out, and in me I had to reconcile like, oh, am I like this heartless workaholic, or am I this loving person? And in my head, I just could not imagine that I am both. I could not. Like and still to this, even though I'm talking about it and I sound like I resolved it, like I'll be like, no, I'm this like evil, selfish workaholic, or this, no, actually, I love and I just want to love. And I think I integrated by making psychotherapy and studying love and connection as, a nice integration. But, there are times where like that pattern, it's that spiral that, probably with my children and their children, there'll be like elements of these of these patterns of like this dyad between the workaholic and the lover. So I don't know
I
what
think
that
that
highlights.
yeah, I like that diet, and it's like an interesting thing how the workaholic will look to be with the partner that is the lover, and the lover will look for this partner to be a workaholic, and and what do you think that means though, right? Like I think there's a workaholic between all of us, inside all of us, and I think there's a lover inside all of us too. So like I don't know. I guess that a good way to integrate it. I have a similar situation going on in my life. I'm 100% a workaholic, and I'm 100% the lover too. And I think that I don't know. I just like doing. I, I I haven't thought about this that deeply, but I'm gonna like process it as we speak. And I think that what I try to do is that when I work, I try to do the thing that I do with love, right? Like I do this podcast. This is a conversation, but it's also an act of love, right? Like having fun, talking about whatever. But also, what we're also doing is kind of like understanding each other, right? And
Hmm.
understanding each other in such a way that may be useful for other people and other people maybe in the environment. So the podcast, we haven't even talked about this. Okay, the podcast name's Thrive, and the reason for it in my mind is that we surround ourselves with people that are akin to us all the time, and 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 I feel like a lot of the time in psychiatry, I'm helping people cope, and there's sometimes that I'm helping people go from coping to thriving, and I just feel like for some people that can't all they're suffering so much and they're so having such a difficult time that it, like enjoying their life to the fullest and what they're doing sounds like this impossible thing,
Hmm.
and I feel like having a conversation with somebody that is enjoying their life, and like we all have our struggles. Okay, we all have our things going on, and at the same time, we can have fun and we can enjoy ourselves, and we can look at each other and say, "Hey, this is a great time," and then lovingly can listen to these conversations and kind of like learn maybe intellectually, but also learn in terms of like how we choose to behave when we behave, because we're behaving all day long. And then so that's one thing I try to do. I try to be loving in in my work, and I guess I try to work in my love. I don't know.
Yeah, yeah, I hear
Yeah,
you.
yeah,
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 that's a great premise behind a podcast. I think that's wonderful.
yeah. I don't know. I don't have the answers. I mean, we clearly have issues. Kibby, you have issues. I have
That's
issues.
true. Yep, yep.
Yeah.
I'm just a evil workaholic. And I can't possibly give love to others. So I can overcompensate by doing by working too hard.
Yeah, but there you go. So then one thing to do is to like release yourself from this inheritance, right? This is
Hmm.
we're all talking about inheritance right now. And yes, we can see it from the perspective of this is a spiral that is very slowly going upward. You're not going to see the end of it. Maybe like your great grandchild will be better and will be free from these habits. Sure, that's a very depressing way to see life, in my opinion. Now, what you could say too is that no, I can like look at myself. I can like get heavy on like on meditation. I can get heavy on psychotherapy. I can like exercise. I can do the best I can and be mindful of the things I do. And maybe in the future go do psychedelic assisted psychotherapy when it becomes legal. And and maybe we'll find out that these yoga teachers are right, and then you can really just like release all this like inheritance that we have. We'll always have a seed of them, but we will not be slave to them. And then when that happens, then you choose who you are, and then that sounds like a cool thing too.
Yeah, it's that we don't have to talk about inheritance like it's a necessarily a bad thing because actually
Right.
the thing is it connects you to your family, right? What do we have if not to share, to teach, to share a reality together, right? Like when you have kids, like you are giving your reality to that kid, and yeah, it has flaws, right? Like of course
Yeah.
my mom has sees it like like, oh, either the lover and the worker are two different mutually exclusive things, right? And for me, that was like very damaging. It's like there's part, then I had to defend against whatever. I had to struggle with
Uh-huh.
that. But I mean, it passed down her experiences to me in a way. And that's, that's one of the things that we have after we die, right? We can influence and pass down our realities to other people.
That's so true. We have good inheritance. I love the entrepreneurial spirit from my father. I love the kind of like the crazy humor from my mom. Um, there are good things that we're not talking about. We're talking about as if it was a burden, and it isn't. It isn't. It isn't. It isn't. And but everything is and it isn't an issue, right? It depends on what we want to look at. That's the cool thing about attention. You can only pay it like full attention to one thing if you're real. Like you can multitask. Like supposedly women can multitask better than men. I'm like really bad about it. But what I do know is that I can pay attention to one thing, and if it's a good thing, I'm having a great time. If it's a bad thing, it's okay as long as I'm trying to fix it. Um,
Do you think that then men are better at mindfulness in that sense, if that's the case?
no, I never thought about it. Never
Right?
thought
Like
about
we never say that, but that's a common thing to be like, oh, women can multitask while men cannot. They could only think of one thing at a time. It's like
it.
then
Oh,
they'd be really
interesting.
good at mindfulness, wouldn't they?
Well, I don't want to get into like a gender fight situation here. I disagree. I think it's an individual thing. I think that it's a matter of how you train your attention. I know several women that are really, really way more focused than I am. And
Mm-hmm.
I know many, many men that are very, very like dispersed. So I don't know. I like sure like you can do an epidemiological study about it. Like, but I'm not
Just
gonna
throwing
get
the
into.
question out there.
um, so we're close to the hour, and I'm trying. I've been doing a lot of these episodes, and sometimes when it's a fun conversation like the one we're having, it becomes very long, and it becomes like almost 2 hours, and I like it, and I have no problem with it, but I'm trying to stick to the hour for a few episodes and see what happens. See what the feedback is. Also, if I do that, I can just post once on Instagram instead of twice, and I'm lazy like that. Like I don't like doing it twice. So maybe like
Okay, we'll keep it short. We'll keep it
let's get
shorter. Is
yeah.
there any burning question you have?
I have no questions to you. I had a
No?
great time talking with you. When was the
Me
last time
too.
I saw you? Like it must have been in Durham somewhere.
Yeah, we probably saw each other in passing. I even inherited, speaking of inheritance, I inherited some of your patients.
Oh, did you?
Yeah,
Oh,
I did, yeah. So it's,
that's nice.
funny that we're talking about this because, yeah, they learned from you and, Noga, and people were like, you have a similar style to Christian. And I was like, I do. And then, they passed them on to me. So that's another point of connection.
Yeah,
But probably the last time was, oh my gosh, years ago. Years ago at this point.
years
This is
ago.
time is a spiral.
Yeah, it is a spiral. So you know what? We need to hang out. I'm gonna invite you to one of my hangout with my friends so you can meet them because we have a bunch of very cool people here in New York, and we should.
That'd be great.
Yeah, yeah. Let's do that. And you should come again to the podcast in the future.
I would love
And
to. This was fun.
yeah, this was a lot of fun. Okay.
I hope I
Thank.
gave you what you needed. I was, just I don't know if I said anything useful, so
I feel like it was so useful. I think people are gonna love it.
good.
Okay,
Oh,
Kibby.
good. Okay.
Thank you.
But yeah, I'd love to see you again. Yeah, I'd love to catch up again.